Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking in. I appreciate it. Today is May 9th to year 2020. And yesterday was the 75th anniversary of VE Day, which was Victory in Europe in the Second World War, the 75th anniversary of the signing of the Germans' unconditional surrender. And I've been... Yeah, I think I've said this in the intro video, but I've been just a history geek, and First and Second World Wars have been kind of my preferred era of study. And there's a documentary, a PBS documentary out there that Ken Burns did about the Second World War called The War. And it highlights 4 towns and how their citizens experienced that war. And I've heard a lot of criticism about this miniseries. It's like, well, that's not the way it was in my town. I think what Ken was trying to get to is just generally, this is what life was like in these different regions. Okay, so you have the Deep South, you have the Upper Midwest, you have the East Coast, and you have the West Coast. Okay, Sacramento, Mobile, Alabama, Waterbury, Connecticut, and then Laverne, Minnesota. Laverne happens to be just a very short drive up the road right over here, and I grew up in this area. So this really intrigued and interested me because I could kind of get my finger on the pulse of what life was like in the area that I grew up during the war by watching and listening to people speak who went through the war. It's a powerful documentary. And again, it's the War by Ken Burns. You can get it on the Apple Store. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's actually available as a streaming for a Prime member. I'd have to take a look. But you can buy it from PBS, whatever. I would really encourage you to watch it. It's very, very, very well put together, wonderfully executed. You get a lot of kind of obscure history in it. A lot of it's common. But then you see, like, there was a Marine from each of the 4 towns who was killed on Iwo Jima. So you find that in all of these towns, people went through similar experiences. Not the same experience, but similar, okay? So just in looking at all of that, one of the people that was highlighted a good bit during the Laverne pieces was Al McIntosh. Al McIntosh published and ran the Rock County Star-Herald during the Second World War and through a subsequent period thereafter. And his kind of personal column was called More or Less Personal Chaff. And it just was, what's life like? Okay, what's going on with the people here in Laverne during this particular time? Well, I got this book. Here you go. Selected Chaff, the wartime columns of Al McIntosh from the archives of the Rock County Star-Herald, as featured in the Ken Burns documentary, The War. I love this book. I love reading it because it's raw, pure, personal history. And I love reading it. I really do. Every time I read Christmas of 1943, I just about cry. I'm going to read that one at Christmas time. But I just want to share with you for review just what happened, what they wrote, and what happened here in this particular area, okay, of the United States on and right after VE Day. So I'm going to his column from May 10th of 1945, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it. We believe the men overseas would have been mighty proud if they could have seen the way the folks back home reacted to the news of victory in Europe. From time to time, shallow-minded observers from other sections of the country, utterly unable to comprehend the stoic calmness of the agricultural Midwest, observe that out here, they don't know there's a war on. They can't understand that the patriotism of Midwesterners, like still water, runs deep and isn't manifested by orgies of emotional exhibitionism. Unlike New Yorkers who whooped, hollered, tore up tons of paper to throw in the streets, the news here was greeted with quiet dignity and reverent restraint. The decision to close the stores Monday was a natural one after word had been received that stores in Sioux Falls had been closed. Nobody knew then that there was a battle between rival news services raging because the Associated Press had scooped the world on one of the biggest news stories of all time. For hours, the pulling and hauling and controversy as to whether or not the news was official would continue. Early Monday morning and for several hours, it looked as if the VE Day proclamation would come at any minute, and that belief was justified inasmuch as President Truman and Prime Minister Churchill were ready to go on the air with the official announcement. One by one, the flags blossomed out on Main Street, and store by store, the employees quietly filed out and the business places were locked up for the day. There was no shouting, no hilarious display of any kind. Most everybody went home. There was quiet exultation over the fact that a great victory had been achieved, but that rejoicing was tempered by the sobering knowledge that there was another great war yet to be won. A number of the churches did not wait for the official VE Day proclamation, which was probably just as well, as it is hard to believe that people could sustain that high pitch of emotion for long, and held their special services. Those churches Monday, and again for those who held their services Tuesday night, were crowded with reverent worshipers who came to give thanks to Almighty God for victory and prayers for strength for the days and months to come. Yes, the men overseas would have been proud if they could have seen for themselves the dignified and reverent way their home folks celebrated victory in Europe. The announcement did result in the lifting of some government bans, which can be noticed on Main Street. The theater marquees were lighted again, and so were the neon signs and store windows, the first time since the brownout went into effect. The curfew, which has meant midnight closing for restaurants, nightclubs, theaters, and other places of entertainment, has now been lifted by order of War Mobilizer Vinson. I love that. It just gives you such a picture of, just such a vivid picture of how everybody handled the news. It was like, thank God that's over. We still have work to do, but thank God this part of it is over. So I just wanted to share that with you today. VE Day 75, VE Day plus 75 years was yesterday. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of the men who gave it all so that you and I could live in the liberty that we have right now. Let's not ever forget them, folks. Let's hold them high in our hearts, hold them dear to our hearts. Hold the families of those, there are still families of these men and women who are, dealing with things. They are still here. You have grandchildren. You have generations of people who had somebody. My grandfather was in the Army Air Corps in the Second World War. He went and served in North Africa. I believe he was a mechanic on a B-24 Liberator bomber. And then there's so many other people. The effect that this generation had that went and fought this war should never be forgotten by us at all. And that's my fervent prayer, is that we don't. Let's remember the men who fought. Let's remember the men who died. And let's hold them dear, and let's hold this time of respect for them dear to our hearts. I'm going to be back with a very special edition on Memorial Day. I'm going to highlight I'm not waiting until Memorial Day to publish more, video for you, but just as a preface, our Memorial Day video is going to be pretty amazing. I did a paper on a chaplain from Mitchell, South Dakota, who was killed in the First World War and is buried in France. I'm going to share that with you. I'm going to share that publication with you, and we're going to talk about that. Just coming ahead, some other plans that we have. We're going to be doing something pretty special for 4th of July, for Independence Day. You'll want to make sure that you are definitely subscribed for that one, so you don't miss that. And we're going to keep on pressing on. Battlefield tours are coming up, overseas trips. As soon as we're able to travel again, we're going to start planning that. We're going to get overseas, and we're going to talk to you about some of the things that are happening over there. We're going to, who knows, I might even get on for a few minutes while I'm over there and broadcast and say, hey, this is amazing. Y'all need to come. So thanks for checking in. And God bless y'all. We'll see you next time around.